Roblox CC or closed community games are games that are not publicly open but accept people into exclusive groups which are allowed to play the game. CC games often partake in predatory marketing tactics in order to trick children into giving them money in exchange for access, and much more within these games, going as far as scamming people entirely in their development. In today's video, I'll be going over the various problems surrounding CC games on Roblox, so let's get straight into it. When I talk about closed community games, there's probably a few which come to mind for most of you watching this right now. Sorcery, Ghoulry, Ninja, maybe even Type Soul, since at one point that was actually a CC game. CC games highly range in this category, but most of them have many roleplay elements to incentivize players to be active within the game. Ghoulry, for example, has a ranking system based on a PvP score you get from killing players, which degrades the less you play. However, this game is also one of the heaviest as far as roleplay elements go, with your faction being random on spawn and the game outright banning players who team with people from other factions. Any game which uses and forces people to engage in roleplay elements as a CC game is outright a negative for me, because these games often sacrifice a smooth gameplay experience in exchange for a realistic roleplay experience, which isn't very fun because most of the time the rules, which are supposed to make the roleplay more realistic and better, just make the game less fun to play. Type Soul, for example, would have given people titles in its original CC release, and these titles would make people extremely powerful and basically unkillable, which was really dumb because it's carried into the public game on Type Soul's initial release, meaning that anyone with a title was basically invincible, so all the CC players had super huge advantages over any normal player, making it super unfair. CC games aren't always made to be just CC games though. While Ghoulry heavily embraces it, most games actually abuse the closed community title in order to add a veil of exclusivity to the game. While most of these games aim to have free releases, such as Jujutsu Infinite, they will often have extremely long testing phases in order to charge people money for CC access. Any of the games I've already mentioned can be used for this as an example. Ghoulry currently charges people through Patreon for access. Jujutsu Infinite, during its initial testing, charged $30 through Discord memberships and had over 400,000 sales for this, meaning that Jujutsu Infinite grossed over $1 million pre-release from just selling tester slots publicly. And they aren't even the worst case of this, because Peroxide, the Bleach game, sold tester slots for upwards of $120 to the Soul Lord membership tier, which isn't even the most expensive I've seen, with Holy War X charging $250 for singular players, while Soul Lord was at least you and 2 other friends, which both are still bad, but one is significantly worse. Now, as for predatory market practices, many of these games do a lot of overly positive advertising in order to get kids interested in their games, or they make a One Piece game. Regardless, the main way they do this is through YouTubers, which they do through 2 different methods, either offering YouTubers free tester spots and early access to make videos. This is highly beneficial, as YouTubers can just make guides on games with hype, and now it's the top performing video on your channel. Since many people are grateful for being let in for free, they decide to make videos quote unquote, and for the lack of a better term, glazing the game in order to hopefully earn developer favor, so that way they can maybe get specs to make more videos with and get more views. Now, the reason why people do this is because talking positively about a game that has some hype around it, that also doesn't have a lot of content on it, is a really easy way to get views. So if you just make a video calling the best Bleach game, the best Jujutsu Kaisen game on Roblox, little kids who like those things are going to click on your video. And that's beneficial to you and the developers, so it's kind of a way to get a whole lot of hype surrounding the game, making little kids more likely to buy stuff like early access. Alternatively, and rarely, developers will pay content creators to make videos glazing their games to make it look better. This has only happened on rare occasions, but it has happened with the games Sorcery and Type Soul, which have paid YouTubers on multiple occasions. And I will not be naming who they paid because I don't want to give them any attention, but they did pay a few people. Now, after building up hype through YouTubers, what do these games do? Well, most of the time, after reaching a certain amount of Discord members, which they also get by adding potential inviter rewards like tester spots, maybe at like 30 Discord invites or something like that, they will begin to sell tester spots with an often limited time or fake allowance limit, making the community think that they only have a certain amount of time to buy it, or they'll have to wait months or years for a free release. Ninja is the most blatant with this in my opinion, having put an imaginary number on the fact that they would close tester selling after a certain amount of people got accepted because they don't want too many testers. When in reality, nobody buying the game is a tester, they're just paying for early access, while the real testers are helping the devs. And even then, I'm pretty sure they gave people a lot of time with that game to actually buy the tester spots, so I don't know where that we don't want too many people in it is, because there were thousands of people on the game at one point. The way I see it, there are 2 types of CC games. real ones which prioritize small role-playing community. Games like Birdcage and Ghoulry's kind of going into like the more public release, but Birdcage especially I would classify as an actual CC game. Old Type Soul was also a real closed community game with titles and priority over getting stronger than people, so that way you could have the specs which came with titles. And then there are fake CC games, which are games that have no real incentive or reason to be closed community other than the fact that they're unfinished and they sell access for money and monetization related purposes. Now the problem with fake CC games is that they're usually just terrible gameplay experiences. They're usually unfinished games which are supposed to be sold to turn a profit, and they say you're playing early access when in reality you're just paying to play a worse version of a game that's going to release in a year. And then the problem with real CC games is that they're usually just terrible gameplay experiences. Birdcage is maybe the most boring Attack on Titan Roblox experience I've ever seen. Like, there's permadeath in that game, and then when your character dies, you have to log your character and who they were in a virtual graveyard. That is real. You have to log your characters in a graveyard when they wipe. That's how bad it is. It's so insanely boring. But then, the fake CC games are just owned by greedy developers looking to abuse FOMO and get money out of little kids. So it's either have to play the most boring, awful Roblox military roleplay experience ever, but it's Attack on Titan themed, like Birdcage. I hate that game so much. Or, you know, greedy developer scamming little kids out of money. It's bad either way. Now, earlier I said that some of these games also actively scam people, and Sorcery is the most clear and cut case of this, and the worst part is, they did it twice, and somehow people just forgot about it, and I don't know how. The first time that Sorcery had scammed, Sorcery had sold CC, or closed community access, to their terribly unfinished game. Like, the first time they started selling game access, it was barely even in a playable state, and I know that because I played it, and it had nothing. There was nothing. There was quests where you could beat up monsters, there was unlocking your curse technique in which you would beat up monsters, and then there was loot which you would get by beating up monsters. It was so poorly unfinished, and it was so bad that it wasn't even worth playing in my opinion. And then they announced that the players would have to buy access per wave after thousands of people already paid for it, meaning anyone who paid to play in Wave 1 would also have to pay to play in Wave 2. And now they did this without really announcing it until after a ton of people had already paid for it. So they had a bunch of people thinking they were paying for early access and that they could play the game, just for them to be told that they would have to pay 2 more times if they want to keep playing during pre-release. And due to this controversy, the game kind of disappeared for a few months before coming back under a few new developers. But the weird thing is, when this game came back, and I made a couple of videos on it, people seem to think that the game was completely new, with many people commenting under how the game is only 2 months old under my videos. That's just not true, and it wasn't true back then either. The game wasn't 2 months old, it was just sold off to new developers 2 months ago. And while there was also the whole scamming part of them using assets that weren't theirs, those assets can still be found in the game, but they were somehow brushed under. It's just so weird that people forgot about this so fast. And currently, this game's about to be a year old, and the worst part about this whole thing is the fact that they did it again. You had to buy an Access Game Pass in order to have access to the game initially. But if you have the Access Game Pass, then you can buy the Playtester Game Pass, which allows you to play during the open testing. So you had to buy a Game Pass to get the ability to buy a Game Pass, which would give you the ability to play the game once they finally open it for open testing. It's really dumb. It really just seems like Roblox games have been slapping on closed community tags to make them seem more exclusive so that way they can get funding through selling early access to players, which is really scummy, honestly. Especially when the devs put price tags on it, with the highest I've ever seen being Holy War X's $250 price tag. And every time these devs put an exorbitant price tag on their game, they always use the same excuse, being, we don't want too many testers, so we made it more expensive. When in reality, their game still ends up with hundreds of playtesters who pay these disgusting prices to play the game early. And then they always let in the YouTubers for free who play the game early, don't talk about any of the negatives, and build up more hype for the game because they don't want to make honest reviews. And in some cases, with certain games making you pay these prices just for the game to have designated testing times, and activity checks will result in you potentially getting removed if you don't play enough. Yes, that's real. There are games that will charge you a whole lot of money just to give you designated testing times. Holy War X, I think, does that. But other than these designated testing times, you also can just be removed if you don't play enough and don't test things. So you're paying money to play this game like it's a job. And you're paying so much money to play this game like it's a job. It's just not worth it in the slightest. Like, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. CC games are a real big problem on Roblox right now. Because, you know, birdcage is maybe the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed. I love you all. Have an amazing day. Shoutouts to Brick, Goobka, and Drizzy Drake Fan. Have an amazing day, and goodbye.